American Adoption Congress presents the 13th International Conference, April 11th to the 14th, 1991, in Garden Grove, California. This is program number D151, tape 7A.
We don't have a mic. Could I get as many of you to come as close forward as you can?
Do I make a circle real fast? Do I make a circle real fast? I mean,
Yeah, could we, as close as you can get to me.
All right, let's circle the wagons, folks. Come on.
There, so I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Denny Glad. And Pat, before you say one word, I've lived in California 8 years, right down the road here, and it didn't do my accent one bit of good. So don't talk to me.
There is a microphone.
Pardon?
There is a mic coming for you.
Oh, very good. Good, great. That'll be fine. There. We are going to talk about the Tennessee Children's Home Society today. And I have often said that I probably could tell that story in my sleep. And I may be testing myself today because I've had about 4 hours sleep since Tuesday morning. So I'm not real sure just how clear I'm going to be on this. We have a panel here. All of these individuals here were placed for adoption through the Tennessee Children's Home. I'm going to introduce them now. Then I'm going to give you a brief thumbnail sketch of the Tennessee Children's Home, and then I'm going to let each of them give you a little bit of their background so that you can understand, because none of their stories are the same. Every one of them are different. And I'll start closest to me was Joy West. Joy was born in Nashville, not Nashville, Goodlettsville, and she was placed here in California. She has searched and she has found her birth family. Can you hear me?
It's better to have one.
All right, just want to double check.
Okay. Can you hear me well enough for me to go ahead with all of this? Sandra Fagan. She was born in Nashville, and she was placed in New York. She was able to find out information about her family, and she'll be sharing that with you later on. Robbie Smith was born in Nashville, placed in Memphis. She has just flown in here last night from her reunion with her birth family, so she'll have a lot to say if you can get it out of her.
What was her name?
Robbie Smith.
Robin Smith.
Mm-hmm.
Don't you dare write that in the newspaper. It's not going to be in the newspaper.
Good. To my right, Mary Lee Ruge. Mary Lee's sister was born in Nashville and was sent out here to California. Melody is her name, is ill, and Mary Lee is attempting to help her locate her birth family. And Fred belongs to Mary Lee. he's there.
Darn it.
Yes, he's taken, right. Linda Austin is from Memphis, Tennessee. I think we've got a mic here. What that is there, you can get behind there with that? Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Now, is that better? Everybody can hear me now? Okay. Where I had gotten to Linda Austin. Linda is from Memphis. Linda is not an adoptee. She is a licensed attorney. She has been working on her PhD for some time on the Tennessee Children's Home story. She has an article in the Tennessee Historical Quarterly that she has done about this. She still has work that she is doing and she's going to give us some insights on some of the legal aspects of this case when we get a chance for her to talk. Pat Schlothauer was born in Memphis and placed in California. She was one of 4 brothers and sisters. Each of them was placed in 4 separate homes. They have been able to make contact with each other. One is deceased, but she's been in touch with her other brother and sister, and she's going to tell us a little bit about that when she gets a chance. There are some of you in the audience who are also Tennessee Children's Home adoptees. Lynn Westmore there, and I'm not familiar enough with Lynn's story to tell it to you now, but I'm sure that she will will be happy to talk to us about it later, right? Rex Molitor, also. Rex just got in touch with me a couple of weeks ago, and we'll be working with him when we get a chance. Kathy Kleinsorge has just been in touch with us, and we're about to get ready to start her search. Is there anyone else here that I don't know about today? Okay. What I would like to do now is just give you a little brief history of the Tennessee Children's Home, as best it can be told, because I'm not sure that anybody knows the complete truth about the Tennessee Children's Home. It was founded in 1897. It was chartered rather than licensed, and that's an important distinction. There were no laws pertaining to adoption in the state of Tennessee at the time that the Tennessee Children's Home was founded. They operated freely, independently, privately, more or less set their own rules. They received that first charter in 1897, and they more or less worked in the Nashville-Davidson County area. In 1913, they received a second charter, which allowed them to expand their operations out across the rest of the state. In time, branches were opened up in the major cities within the state of Tennessee. Memphis, Chattanooga, Knoxville, Jackson, Tennessee. The branch that is the most notorious is the Shelby County Division, Memphis, Tennessee, run by Georgia Tann. Georgia Tann took over that office in 1924. We have not been able, our organization has not been able, nor has anyone else that I know of been able to determine precisely what her qualifications for that position were. Again, that's not too terribly surprising when we think of the time factor that we're talking about. There just wasn't that much of, in the way of training for social workers at that time. So far as we have been able to determine through our research, and a good bit of it comes from records which have been ordered open by courts from the beginning, Ms. Tann wrote her own rules as to what and how she was going to make her adoption placements. She had a great deal of political influence throughout the state. She acquired a great deal of political influence throughout the state. But maybe one of the most common questions is asked of us is, how did she do that? How did she get away with what she did for so long? And it's difficult to answer that because what we think of today does not apply in those times. We had a political machine in the state of Tennessee. We had a gentleman in Memphis, Shelby County, who was the head of that machine. No one got elected to any position from governor down in the state of Tennessee without Mr. Crump's approval. Anyone who incurred Mr. Crump's displeasure was not in office very long. Ms. Tann did not incur his displeasure. She was very much within his political circles. In 1941, she got a third charter. By that time, laws certainly had already been written and were on the books which regulated adoption procedures. A portion of that law would have required that before the Shelby County Division could have received a separate charter, they would have had to have submitted to investigation by the then Department of Public Welfare, and they certainly would have had to have met the standards set up by that agency. That was a part of the law in 1941 when she received her third charter, her separate charter. Secretary of State issued it to her without benefit of that law. She was not required to be investigated by anyone. So far as I am aware, there are no explanations as to how she was able to obtain that charter. But from that time on, she operated the Shelby County Division of the Tennessee Children's Home independently of the state organization of the Tennessee Children's Home. And I say independently because the parent branch, the members of the parent branch later in 1950 always maintained that they had no idea as to what was going on in the Shelby County branch. I find that difficult to believe because they continued supplying children to Miss Tan. They could have been placed in Nashville, they could have been placed in Chattanooga, they could have been placed in Knoxville. I see no reason why in such large numbers that they would have been bringing them to Memphis, to Miss Tan, and not have known something of what was going on. Nevertheless, nothing was ever proved in that respect. So far as is known, Georgia Tan is the culprit as far as the notorious Tennessee Children's Home Society goes. There were complaints brought and made all through the years against her activities. They really didn't get anywhere, again, because of her political influence. There would be a couple of in-house investigations and she would be cleared, and they go on as usual. In 1946, there was a judge, Samuel O'Bates, of the Shelby County Probate Court, who wrote a 7-page letter of complaints to the Commissioner of the Department of Public Welfare, in which he enumerated all of the various practices that she was had been accused of doing at that point, and asked that some investigation be done and that something be done about it. Unfortunately, it was not, but his letter in 1946 was the basis for the investigation that did come about in 1950. Now, the charges that have been brought against her range from removing infants from birth mothers, birth parents, without their knowledge, without their consent, against their will, to falsifying the records, to certainly placing children out of state, to providing the adoptive parents with false information, to accepting monies that she was not entitled to have. You name it, it just runs the gamut as to what she was accused of doing. There are people in Memphis, in Shelby County, in Tennessee, to this day who do not believe that, who will say that that is not true, that she was a victim of politics, that none of those charges were ever proven. As a matter of fact, as Sandra, I think, will be able to tell us in a little bit, our Department of Human Services still will say that those charges were never proven. To the extent that Miss Tan died in 1950, at the time that the investigation began, and no criminal charges were ever brought against her, that may be true. It is not true in terms of the research that has been done. There were lawsuits that were brought against her estate to recoup the money that she made off with by the state of Tennessee. Those were settled in the favor of the state of Tennessee, and I think those would be legal, that would be legal proof that she had done wrong there. We have been, when I say we, the organization that I am a member of, Tennessee's The Right to Know, has been working with Tennessee Children's Home adoptees for the last 12 years. We have the stories that they tell us, we have the stories that the birth mothers tell us, we have the stories that the adoptive parents tell us. We have access to juvenile court records in Memphis. We have access to records of local orphanages in Memphis. Many of these people have gone into court and gotten their records opened, and those records tell the story of what happened. There is no doubt in my mind that Miss Tan was guilty of everything that she has ever been accused of in a large number of instances. But she was not guilty of them in every single instance. She did not steal and sell 5,000 babies. If you were born and placed for adoption through the Tennessee Children's Home, that does not necessarily mean that you were stolen from your birth parents. You may have been, but you may not have been. The charge of selling, I have trouble with, not from the standpoint of Miss Tan, but from the standpoint of the adopted parents. So far as our research has shown to us, they were not aware of these activities. Most of them lived in states where they probably did not qualify because of age as much as anything else to adopt children. By word of mouth, they learned that there was an organization in Tennessee where they could get children. They did not mind that they didn't have to go through a lot of red tape. They did not ask a lot of questions. They did not find it unusual that they would need to pay transportation fees to have those children sent out to them. They did not think it was wrong for them to make a donation to a home that was doing such good work. It never occurred to them that they were purchasing a child. So when the charges are made that Miss Tan sold so many babies, I really would like to qualify that a little bit, at least from the standpoint of the adoptive parents. I don't really think that was necessarily true. Other than that, as I said, I do believe that we have evidence that any charge that was ever brought against her, we've seen it. We know it's true. Some of these people here on the panel can tell you that is also true. I think I will now just kind of take a break at that point, and let's talk to some of these individuals and let them tell you their stories so you can get a little bit better flavor of exactly what happened. And I don't know really where I want to start. Joey?
You didn't tell me what I was supposed to say.
I'm not supposed to tell you. This is your...
What do you want me to say?
I'll just give you another brief rundown on Joy's. Joy was born in Goodlettsville, Tennessee, Sumner County. When you were 3, Joy was removed from her birth family by the Davidson County Juvenile Court, not the Shelby County Juvenile Court. And let me back up just a minute, because I didn't say anything about Judge Camille Kelly, who was the Shelby County Juvenile Court judge. And there have been many charges brought to the effect that she worked hand in glove with Georgia Tan in placing children taking children from their birth families and placing them with Georgia Tan to place for adoption. We believe those charges are true, and we think we have verified it by being able to examine juvenile court records. And I'll come back to that later. But I wanted to make the distinction that Joy was not removed by the Shelby County Juvenile Court. Judge Kelly did not have anything to do with her. She was removed from her home by the Davidson County Juvenile Court. So far as I've ever heard, there was nothing that court was doing that had anything to do with the Tennessee Children's Home. She was placed with the Nashville branch of the Tennessee Children's Home Society. For some reason, she was turned over to the Shelby County division of the Tennessee Children's Home, to Miss Tan. She was sent to California, placed here in California. What county did your adoption? No, what county was your adoption finalized in back in Tennessee?
Memphis.
Shelby County. Okay. Now, does that help you? Can you go from there?
Well, I was brought here to California and was told since I was small that I was adopted and that I was the pick and that I was the cutest, the sweetest, and so on. And of course I believed it. And when I got older, I wanted to find out who I was. I mean, it's just, you have to know. And my adoptive parents were, of course, thinking that I was going to disown them and go with my birth parents, which wasn't true. And I finally saw a TV show, Unsolved Mysteries. I love that show. And I heard about Denny Glad, and I wrote to her immediately, and she wrote back saying that it was Christmas time and the holidays, please wait until after the first of the year. I didn't want to, but I figured,
Oh, I
okay.
was going out of town.
I know. So I said, okay, and Denny helped me. If it wasn't for this lady, I wouldn't be here today. I
It's
wouldn't
the
know
organization,
anything.
Tennessee's Right to Know.
Okay, and she told me about the laws that they had passed, and told me who to write to and what to say, and she wrote some of the letters for me and sent them to me to sign and notarize and whatever, and send them, and I did, and then I don't know, I would hit dead ends, and I was waiting for the information back from the state and this and that, and finally I asked her to send me names and phone numbers of anything in Goodlettsville, and she sent me the phone number and address of the Chamber of Commerce in Goodlettsville, and I called and I said, do you have a historian or anybody that does any kind of adoption research or anything like that? And she says, the woman you want to talk to is Ann Garrett. So I got 3 phone numbers for her and finally reached her at her home, and she said, I don't do that kind of stuff. And we continued to talk, and I guess she thought, well, maybe she needed some more to do, because she's a busy lady. And she took on my case, and she went and talked to some of the older people in Goodlettsville. There's a sawmill there. It's a small town, and I suppose it was even smaller when I was little. And she talked to this one man, and I think the name was Crump. And that's when you said Crump, I connected it. And anyway, he was a neighbor, his family, he's the same age as my oldest brother and sister. And he remembered a George and a Myrtle. And he said that was my brother and sister. But my brother changed his name to Fitzpatrick, because I was looking for Patrick. So I found out my brother's name, because it's hard to look for a sister, because finding out my sisters, they've been married, all of them, at least 3 times, if not 4 or 5. And so that would have been impossible. And I found my brother's phone number was unlisted at his request. I didn't want to call as an emergency because I didn't know what kind of health he was. I knew he was around 63, and I didn't want to have him have a heart attack or anything. So I called a girlfriend, and I said, what should I do? She says, call, break in, tell him it's an emergency. I says, you do it. So she says, okay. So she happened to call, I had called the police department, that's what they told me. So she called, and she got my brother's address. She called me back and said, write him, or send him a telegram. And I'm thinking, that's too slow. I want to talk to him now. So I called the police again, and this time I got lucky. I got a woman officer. I told her briefly the story, and I said, I think this is my brother. And she turned around, and I could hear her. She radioed to a patrol car, said, take this name and phone number to George Fitzpatrick now. She gave him the phone number and the name, and turned to me and said, is that correct? I said, yes, ma'am, and I wanted to hug her and kiss her. And I thanked her, and I hung up, and 7 minutes later my phone rang. It was my sister-in-law that I didn't know I had. And she said, I'm calling for George Fitzpatrick, just a moment. And my brother got on the phone, and I went to pieces. My girlfriend that's here with me, she was there. She came to take over for me. She broke down, because she's been through this with me all the way. And through my brother, I got a sister's phone number. Through that sister, I got another sister's phone number. And I always thought I was an only child. Come to find out, I'm one of 7. And I have a baby brother.
These are part of them.
And my baby brother's taller than me. I wanted sisters and brothers as tall as I am, because I've always been tall. And all through school, I've been the tallest one in my class. And I thought, finally, I've got brothers and sisters, they're going to be tall too. Well, my 2 brothers are tall. My sisters are little short girls. So I went back in December of last year and visited for 13 days. And it was wonderful. And I hope to go back someday or have them come out and visit me.
Thank you, Joy. A point I forgot to make about Joyce is that she really began her search by going through the state. And we do have some amendments to our adoption law which are very helpful. She was able to get non-identifying information. The state Department of Human Services conducted a search for Joey's parents and were not able to find them. And Joy was able to get her original birth certificate. So that was where she had the information as to who she was and where she was born.
Well, when they contacted for my birth parents too, they called my sister, Riola, and asked my sister about our parents. And my sister couldn't understand why, after all these years, they'd been dead for so many years, why they called. And I got so mad at that lady. Why couldn't she have given my sister my phone number and said, your sister's looking for you, here's her phone number? But the law said no.
Yeah.
I want to ask a question. Did your adopted parents share any information about your biological parents, or had they not received it, or what?
My
Excuse me. They told me when they put this cord on me that I was supposed to repeat the question from the audience so that it would be picked up on this tape. The question is, did her adoptive parents share any information with her about her biological background?
Or did they have?
Did they have any?
Yes, my adoptive mother told me that I was an only child. My father was killed in the Second World War. My mother died either at birth or shortly after I was born. And growing up all those, I knew about it since I was little up, but I did tell my adoptive mother when I came to them, because my adoptive mother is the type that will question. She wants, like especially kids will give more information than an adult. An adult knows when to shut up, a child just talk. And I love to talk. And she told me that I knew of a Lenny, that I lived with a family named Lenny and Annie. Well, apparently the Annie was my mother and the Lenny was her boyfriend, because my father's name was Henry. But she just said she used to tell me I was born in Memphis. On my adoptive birth certificate, it said Sumner County is all. Growing up, that's all I knew was Sumner County. I had no idea. I assumed I was born in a house. I didn't know. I just had a lot of assumptions. But my mother said that when we went back to Tennessee, I remember the trips, and she said that reading the papers before she signed them, she found out this information. Then after I found my birth family, I asked her, why did you tell me my mother and father were dead and there were no? She said, because that's what I thought.
Which is not unusual at all. That is the type of information that Georgia Tann would tell to her adoptive parents. Yes?
Why were you removed from your birth family?
The question is, why were you removed from your birth family?
Well, I
You
don't
need to come back here, I think.
know for sure. One sister wants to tell me the whole truth, nothing but the truth. My other sister wants to tell me only the good part. I believe, in my heart, that my mother, they insist that my mother didn't have a boyfriend until my father died. None of my sisters or brothers reads or writes. So if you figure, you know that my father was alive when I was born. Because he didn't die, on his gravestone it has the year he would die. I feel that my mother had a boyfriend, and my oldest brother kept saying to me, that woman came and took you. That woman came and took you. I says, what woman? He told me the name. I have it written down, but I left everything at home. I think that I was taken because my mother had a boyfriend. And in those days, of course, that was terrible. I don't know the real reason, though.
None of your siblings were taken from the home, just you.
Want to say that? I have a younger brother. He was taken after I was. But I think from Ann Garrett talking to this farmer that lived across the street, he told her that my mother and sisters were party girls. So I think that he was taken because my older brothers and sisters were in the house. They remember the woman coming and taking me away, But I was 3, I was the youngest. They were all older.
You were already 3 years old?
No, I forgot the name that my brother said. Like I say, I have it written down, but it wasn't Georgia Tam.
It would have been someone from the Nashville, Davidson County Juvenile Court, and again, as I said before, nothing that we have seen in our research indicates that there would have been anything that they were doing wrong. I think in Joy's case, where we had to pick up with what was wrong with her adoption, was from the moment that she came into Georgia Tam's hands and was placed for out of state for adoption, which was wrong to have been done at that time. The Tennessee Children's Home had no license to place a child in California or any other state. Tennessee Children's Home was not licensed to place children in Tennessee. They were chartered. And they always refused to submit to an investigation. So they never had a license even to place children in the state of Tennessee. Certainly, they never went through the process of becoming licensed and bonded in any of these other states where children were placed. So I think this is the aspect of Joyce that we would have to say was improper as far as the Tennessee Children's Home goes. I see a lot of hands out there. Could I ask you to wait just a minute? We've got quite a few more other individuals here, and I think as they tell some of their stories, it may answer some of the questions that some of you have, and if not, we'll be happy to try to answer them, so if you'll just hold those for a minute. You were asking a few moments ago about the type of information, you sir, that adoptive parents were given. I think Mary Lee's situation, as far as her sister was concerned, sheds a sunlight on that, because so far as I know, your adoptive parents had no information about your sister. Is that right?
Well, they have a
Yeah.
sheet here.
Yeah. Oh, okay, let me see that just a moment. We have standardized sheets of information that we have seen that Ms. Tan loved to send out to adoptive parents. They're pretty much typical. You know, if you've seen one of these, you've seen just about all of them. The mother is so tall and she's got brown eyes and auburn hair. She's of English and Scottish ancestry, and she's Protestant in religion. And the father completed high school and served in the Army overseas. Didn't everybody in the 1940s there? And that's pretty generally the type of information that the adoptive parents would have been given. So as you can see, that's not too terribly much. But Mary Lee, if you would, now, if you remember, I told you that Mary Lee is trying to help her sister locate her birth family, and I will let her explain to you why that is necessary.
I don't know if she's having this well, I'm 42 and my sister's 43. My parents adopted my sister in December, and then my mom got pregnant with me a couple months later. So, but anyway, I just found out about this about 6 months ago. There was an article in the LA Times about the Children's Home Society, and I had a friend call me. She said, "Did you see this article?" And she said, "Did Melody come from Tennessee?" And I said, "Yeah, I think she did." And I started going through my parents' files, because my parents are both deceased, and I started finding checks that were made out to Georgia Tan. They had checks for transportation costs, and my parents paid a total of about $750. And they received a letter in August from Georgia Tan about getting a baby, that it would take probably 1 to 2 years, and they would have to have a home study first. And I think in September, they got a letter from Georgia Tan again saying that there was a social worker coming out named Alma Walton who would visit their home if they were still interested in obtaining a baby. And November 2nd, Alma Walton came out and visited my parents' home, and obviously my parents were middle class, and she probably figured, well, they can afford the money, whatever. So that was November 2nd, and November 15th or 14th, they got a letter saying that they had been approved for a baby. And on December 6th, the baby was delivered at the LA Biltmore at night, like per typical. And my parents had no idea. I'm sure that they had no idea that this was all done illegally, and I'm sure they just had no idea. And all my parents ever told me was that my sister had been adopted out of Tennessee, and that's basically all the information that they had. And my sister, she has mild retardation, and she has the mind of about a 12-year-old. And she looked normal till she was 10 or 15. And when she was in school in kindergarten, that's when they started thinking that something was wrong because she wasn't picking up like the rest of the kids were in her class. And so they started taking her around to different doctors, and they were told that she had brain damage, possibly happened at birth, they don't know. Because my sister was 2 months old when they got her. So, anyway, she lived at home till she was 24, and she's now in a board and care home.
I'm hung.
But I'm trying to find my sister's birth family and medical information, hopefully so we can help her since she is on medication. And it'd be a big help for her if I could locate her birth family and some medical records. This might be hereditary with her, I don't know. Something could have happened in the home. Maybe there was neglect at the Children's Home Society. Maybe she had a high fever, was in an incubator. Oh. So, I'm sorry. So that's why it's really important for me to try to find out.
In the records that we've seen that people have been able to get opened, there is very little medical information or background. It's rather doubtful that even if Mary Lee were able to get a court order to get the records opened, that there would be anything in there that would give any kind of medical background on the birth family or that would help them to understand the possible source of her sister's problems. It's really necessary, in order for her to learn what she needs to know to help her sister, that she make contact with some member of that birth family. The records just are not going to do her that much good, I don't think, from what I have seen. But we're going to discuss that and see if there are not some ways that we can work independently with her on that. As an example of what the records don't tell or do tell and how inaccurate or inadequate they might be, Robbie Smith, as I told you, has just returned from a reunion with her birth family. Robbie petitioned the court in Dyer County, which is where her adoption took place, a small rural county court outside of Memphis. She was able to get her records opened. There was a surrender statement in there with her birth mother's name on it. There were notes in there made by Georgia Tan as to the background circumstances. In addition to those records, she was able to get her original birth certificate. It's a good thing she got that original birth certificate because there certainly was nothing in those records that would have helped Robbie to be able to find her parents, her birth parents. Robbie? I want you and me to play a game, if we may.
Oh, you've got them.
Yes.
And I've got them.
And you've got them.
Yeah,
You've got
them. Mine is at least one.
What I'd like to do, if it's okay, with you,
Okay.
is that all right? I'd like to tell you what the notes in her record said, and then I'd like Robbie to tell you what it really turned out to be.
Oh, okay.
Is that
But
all
do you
right?
want the typed one instead of the handwritten one?
Okay.
Because I have a typed version, which is easier to read if I
Okay.
can find it.
If you have it, I think I can
I
do
know I
that.
have it, because that's not accurate. If my hands would quit shaking with stage fright, this would be easier to do. All right.
That's all right. That's all right.
What'd you get, Steve? There was no water anyway.
Okay, this information came from Robbie's unsealed records.
This concludes Side A. Please turn your tape over and continue on Side B. The American Adoption Congress presents the 13th International Conference, April 11th to the 14th, 1991, in Garden Grove, California. This is program number D151, tape 7B.
But it wasn't enough to make them rich. I really think I've come up to the conclusion that I believe the reason they did this, both Tan and Kelly love national attention. Kelly got a lot of national attention. They got to be friendly with important people. Important people would call them and say, we haven't been able to get a baby. We've been on the list for 4 years in New York. We can't get one. And she'd say, well, I'll help you out. And it got to be from 48 on to 50, there was an incredible amount of children going from here to Los Angeles to New York. And I believe in maintaining these friendships, they just couldn't say no. They just felt like they couldn't say no. And they felt like, anyway, we're doing the children a good turn. You know, and in many of these cases, there were drinking problems, there were problems in the family. And they just rationalized it to themselves that they were really, truly doing the right thing. But I just want to caution you, you have to really think in terms of Memphis, Tennessee, the Crump era, and the historical context of all this to understand it. And something else, I was telling the lady over there, Georgia Tan was a notary. So all you had to do then was appear before a notary to give up your child for adoption. So Georgia Tan could be the director of the agency in one room and golf in the other and notarize all the records too. She had a secret post office box that she got money from this operation in. And she led a double life. She said one thing to the press. She said she had a wonderful agency that had all the safeguards of modern science. She spoke all over the country, but it was just, she led a double life. It's just, and Judge Kelly did too. It's incredible about I've just really become fascinated by all this, and there's really a lot more aspects to it than that. But I guess I learned. What?
What date did she die?
Georgia Tan died on the 15th of September, 1950, and
How'd you manage to do it?
Well, there have been reporters in Memphis who have, I think, investigated that. But what it is, I think the scandal did not come out until the governor of Tennessee, the governors of Tennessee knew in the early 40s. They all knew about this. The governor, Gordon Browning, was the governor. He was Crump's bitter foe. He hated Mr. Crump. He hated him. And as soon when he got in, Walter Chandler, who was the mayor of Memphis then, John Brown, who was the U.S. attorney, and several other people went to Governor Browning, and they told Governor Browning, you've got to do something about Georgia Tan. And he said, well, we'll have to wait till after the elections, of course, can't do anything, because we don't, and then this is when all this started, as long as there was a friendly governor, and there was a friendly governor through the 40s, the governor knew about it in the early 40s, knew all about this, and continued to let this exist because Memphis could deliver 60,000 votes. We're also talking about one party. We're talking about one party South. So if you win the Democrat primary, your candidates are in for representatives and for governor. So they wanted those 60,000 votes. And they did whatever they wanted. I mean, they went along with Crump, and they went along with Waldauer, and they went along with Kelly. But I don't believe the women were nearly as wealthy as has been portrayed. And I believe some of the placements were well made, but many of them were not. But I don't know if they, Tan not being a social worker, I don't know that she even thought it through completely. At all. I mean, she didn't realize what damage she was doing. She just didn't. But she's incredible. I mean, she's incredible because she's bad, and in a way, she's even worse when you start digging into it. But the whole county was so corrupt. Having a machine for 40 years, it spawned. This was its last evil fruit of corruption that comes from this kind of system.
Something occurs to me as I listen to this, and that is that we're focusing on this kind of corruption, and yet in my experience in 1985 and 1986 in Arizona, there was a very extensive agency, which some of you may be familiar with, Birth Hope, which is part of the Friends of Children outlet, if you'll call it that, which was indicted. And it was the 9th indictment against the agency. And I know personally that the state of Arizona did everything it could to go after this agency and remove its license. And because of the money coming out of Chicago from the original agency's operation, they were unable to do this. and they spent a lot of time and money on it. And I don't believe that anyone in this agency, at least in Arizona, has any political ties, and yet the charges came because 3 children had been removed. A mother had signed a temporary order, and a father went to visit and found his children were gone and placed for adoption. They were 1, 2, and 3. And this is in 1985 and 1986. So what I'd like to put before the group is that this stuff is still going on.
I don't doubt that.
And it's going on in an agency that is throughout the United States and
He's-
still
you want me to sit down?
selling
No, I
babies.
just want to share the mic here. Oh, okay, okay.
Just add to her comments, and this is all anecdotal, I have no proof, but this lawyer in Chicago, a very sharp lawyer, has made incursions into a number of states. Each state he goes into, he knows the regulations, he draws up the necessary documents, gets the license, and if there's any complaints or if there's any problems, then he uses all the legal expertise that he has to combat it. And if he doesn't win here, in like Connecticut and New Jersey, then he's going to go someplace else. And you're right, I mean, he is moving to whatever states seem to be the most vulnerable.
And that's the way it's been done. I mean, there was supposed to, in 55 and 56, there was national legislation introduced. And the Senate passed it and the House killed it, and there has never been any adoption laws to regulate interstate adoption practice. Even when all this came out, it didn't really make that much difference. But see, states' rights was very important here. These people could use, like states' rights, you know, to say it should be up to the state of Arizona, or it should be up to the state of Tennessee, and you're encroaching on our territory.
But each state has a different level of sophistication with regards to the regulations. Some states are lax.
Could I make a point just from the standpoint of the adoption movement? Tennessee Children's Home Society could never have happened without the secrecy that all adoption is surrounded by. None of these, the one you're talking about, could not have happened. The confidentiality of the files. How in the world are you going to do anything? I can't do
I'd like
anything.
to know, were there any connections between Children's Home Society and other states or the national level of organization and Tennessee Children's Home Society? Because in my own experience,
Do we need to
some
stop?
of these practices, I'm not saying that actual baby stealing is happening, but certainly the falsification has been discovered, falsification of information. I think it's common practice. But I would like to know if there are any connections, and if so, what, and if there is national, obviously, what response is the national organization for Children's Home Society making to all this?
Well, I don't think there was any connection to Tennessee Children's Home in any of the other states, but I'd like to point out there are congressional hearings in September 1955, and there were in November 1956 that was conducted by Senator Estes Kefauver of Tennessee and Senator Thomas Dodd of Connecticut, and there were several, at least 4 black market organizations that existed in the 40s and 50s. One that went from Montreal, Canada to New York City, another one in Norman, Oklahoma, the one in Tennessee, and one in Texas. And they usually were conducted really under the auspices of the local political machine, because there was no way that you could keep this kind of thing a secret. There were maybe a dozen or more people that knew all about this. Ben Franklin said two could keep a secret if one is dead, but there's just too many people that were involved in all of this. But just getting back to your question, I don't think there was really any response on the national level in Tennessee. First, to get this adoption scenario set up, in 1937, the Tennessee legislature passed a bill that said that you didn't have to be a resident of Tennessee to adopt children. So this, in my opinion, was the corrupt machine readying the state so that their attorneys could make their fees, people could drop into Memphis. Sometimes they dropped into Memphis, took the baby, went to court that afternoon, and flew back. But this is the price that was paid for that kind of thing, and still goes on.
Some states.
I'm kind of fascinated when you mentioned Pearl Buck, because I had read where she would go across the country lecturing, trying to get a law passed that required single mothers to, it would be a law. If you were single, you had to relinquish your baby. And because of her prominence, she won a Nobel Prize for Literature. She was very prominent. I'm sure that these laws were not passed, but it's fascinating. I wonder if you uncovered anything in terms of her relationship with Georgia Tann more than what you mentioned, because we birth mothers in the 60s, another thing that you said that it was almost amusing if it wasn't so sad, when you were saying that the unwed mothers were coerced by telling them that their babies would be better off.
They'd be better off.
Well, then all of our adoptions are illegal, because that went on all through the 60s. It's still going on today, because I work with single moms. And constantly being told that because you're single, you are not fit. And so we inherited that. We inherited the attitude of the people in Tennessee, the crumbs or whatever in Tennessee, and Carl Buck. It was this attitude of just, they don't have a right. They don't have a right to have their children. And it kind of passed through the...
Well, see what it is, at least in the South too, it's a class issue to a certain extent. We're talking about Judge Kelly and Georgia Tann that came from upper strata South, and they really, they just don't have much patience for people that are having problems, and they really think maybe they're a little bit better anyway, So that's what I think anyway.
Don't you think playing God is addictive? And the more you play God, the more you feel a sense of entitlement to play God some more. And sometimes that's enough without the money. Without the rest of it, the corruption you mentioned.
I think that's what it is.
I'm firmly convinced that's what it is.
Because they did not live in the lap of luxury, no matter what you may read. They did not. And I think that they just like to be around important people. They wanted to make their important friends happy. They would just do this,
One comment on Pearl Buck, and I read the book that has a reference to the fact, her motives were very altruistic. She believed that it was too great a burden on a young woman to make that decision to give up her child, and that if it was just mandatory, then that was not her burden anymore, and therefore she could live with herself better by not having to make that decision. That was her reasoning behind it.
Yeah, this is what Pearl Buck thought.
They could relieve her of that burden by taking the child, and she didn't have to face up to that or feel guilty or anything.
She wrote a book at that time, I think it's Children for Adoption by Pearl Buck, and a number of articles, and she argues that that she doesn't think any unwed mother ought to keep the child because of the social stigma.
It's so long ago.
I know.
But see, she was born in 1880 or whatever it was, and so this is the way she felt. This is the background that she came from. And at the same time, she was writing all these articles, and she was saying, we don't need legislation. See, I really firmly believe that Georgia Tann, that there were people that wanted tougher interstate adoption laws, and there were other people who brought up diversionary issues to try to get everybody's mind off of passing the national laws, and they were pretty successful in doing it too. I believe it worked, and because Tann was on the stump in Baltimore and in New York City saying, we don't need that kind of laws. We have the right kind of laws now. All we need to do, there wouldn't be any black market adoption if we would find out first that we would get national statistics on adoption. And also that we would, if we got some of these children that were living in orphanages, out of orphanages, and let them be adopted, then there wouldn't be this kind of a problem. So these are the issues that she raised, and I think it may have been sort of diverting for people. Most people don't understand these kind of complex issues without they study them. And
my name is Sarah Dick, and I'm here from Berkeley, California. I just had to come to this workshop because I was a small child in Memphis. And my older sister and my brother were both born at Baptist Memorial in Memphis. And we could have easily been a Georgia Tann family, very easily, because it was kind of a troubled time for my family. My mother's health wasn't good. My father was having trouble holding down a job. My older sister was born with blonde hair and green eyes. My brother was blonde hair and blue-eyed. I mean, the typical Georgia Tann family. And my family at that time went through troubled times when we were living in Memphis, and we could have easily been a Georgia Tann family.
And
guess
people
just
put their
by-
trust in Georgia
In fact,
Tanner.
at one time, my mother, and my mother was very submissive and very weak, and if somebody would have come in and said, "You're not good enough," she just would have said, "Oh, dearie me, I'll let somebody else help me." She would have never seen us again. And at one point, my grandparents came down, my mother's health wasn't good, and they took me back with them to take care of me for a while, but, yeah, we lived in Memphis in the 40s and 50s.
It's just a lack of sensitivity to these kind of issues. Just an apparent
Did
lack
you
of
write to us?
sensitivity.
Yes, I wrote you a letter.
Now that you were talking to me, I do remember that.
Terminate about 1950, I mean,
Well, it did. It terminated in 1950. In 1951, the Tennessee Children's Home Memphis branch was closed down. I believe that the Nashville organization, the Tennessee Children's Home, also knew all about this, because I have uncovered old documents, old memoranda within Governor Thomas Dewey's papers in New York State that Mr. Cornelius, Charles Cornelius, who was a prominent lawyer in Nashville, he knew about this because he had been written about this repeatedly. But no one would dare do anything against Mr. Crump. Mr. Crump would run people out of town. He could have, if you were a businessman, he had the plumbing worked on outside your business so people couldn't go in. He would have people trail you around. People would get threatening phone calls. He was in control of the whole city, and because of his character and personality, I can't not believe that he didn't know about this, even though some people say that.
Is it true that many sick babies died at one time, that epidemic, and she just sent their bodies to the crematorium? Is that really true?
Well, I don't know about the crematorium part, but I mean, I know some children went up from that, but I do know that in 46, 40 children died in the diarrhea epidemic at the Tennessee Children's Home, and local pediatrician Clyde Crosswell resigned and said that he just couldn't put up with it anymore. And Judge Bates had written a letter in 46, and it's true, but I don't know. I think a lot of it, though, has to do, we're talking about people who didn't get good prenatal care, and I mean, Georgia Tann didn't make them sickly, but she didn't pay much attention. I mean, she just wanted to just send whoever it was that wanted a baby, and people just took their chances,
But isn't it true that, like, instead of keeping the sick babies isolated from the healthy babies, they were just all in one room?
That's right.
And there was an epidemic and they did die?
That's right.
One thing that's hard for me to understand is, in all these thousands of cases, it's just incredible to me that not one parent took revenge on Georgia Tann. I mean, we're talking about the Deep South, well, Mid-South. It seems strange to me that not one father or mother was so enraged at having their children stolen that they just didn't go shoot Georgia Tann. I mean,
There many guns.
well, no, I mean, I spent my childhood in the South, and there were...
I really agree with you on that point, and I don't know why that didn't take place, but there were a lot of those parents that did try to take legal action beginning back in the early 30s, and the judges there were also caught up in all of that, and they would turn them down.
That many thousands of parents, not one took, wanted violent revenge and just went ahead and did it. I mean, I'm really surprised because she was so ruthless in some cases.
No, I think that these families were so besieged with poverty issues and just trying to go on from day to day, and they just didn't have the energy. They didn't have it. They couldn't, and many of these people couldn't go to court. You have to have an attorney, and you have to be willing and able to spend money on this kind of thing. And it's just true. I've been a public defender too, and it's just true that if you don't have as much money as somebody, you're not going to get the same kind of defense. These parents did not have enough money to go into court. They went sometimes. They would go and beg Camille Kelly to tell them something, or Georgia Tann, and she would throw them out. And she got callous and cold-hearted. It hurt her any, she just sent them along their way, and they didn't know what to do. I mean, they were told things that they couldn't cope with. There wasn't any such thing as psychological counseling for this kind of. Okay.
We're getting the time.
Okay.
We're getting the time thing. We got to close it up.
Okay, is it about
Yeah.
to be through, or what?
Right. I think there are other uses for this room, and there are other people have to go to some of the other meetings.
I'm sorry, I get kind of carried away with it.
Well, it's easy to get carried away.
Can I get, did you want to ask something?
Yeah.
I got time for that, haven't I, Danny?
Have you?
One last-
She's the one telling me time, so if she says...
No.
Okay.
What is the what's been the reaction of the Tann and Kelly
Kelly family through all this?
Well, Georgia Tan doesn't really have that much family left now. What happened was Georgia Tan adopted a daughter, but I don't believe from Memphis. I believe from the Texas Children's Home. She died in the 70s, and her husband is dead too. And June Tan adopted 2 children and had who are living supposedly in. The daughter adopted 2 children who are supposed to live in California, and and 2 of them were natural children, and they don't remember that much about their grandmother. They say that they were told that Georgia Tan was like a habitual gambler, that she would go to Havana and gamble, and that got rid of a lot of money. But they don't remember that. They don't remember that much about her. And Judge Kelly's family, Judge Kelly's husband died in 1928. Another son died in 1939. Her oldest son died in the 70s, and they think Judge Kelly was a saint. Her daughter-in-law is the only one alive. She nursed Judge Kelly in her last illness, and she just thinks that Judge Kelly was a saint. But Judge Kelly had done a lot of good things. It's just that she turned corrupt in her later years. Did you have something?
Yes, John.
Are there birth parents birth parents in these cases who are still alive and can speak to these issues?
Yes. I was not able to have anyone here today because they couldn't come. But yes, we do have birth parents. We have correspondence from them that they had with Georgia Tan, as well as.
Is that covered in here? Anything about what the birth parents are saying?
Yes.
There was a rerun last night of this Georgia Tan.
Yes, I heard that today. I'm glad I'm out here and not at home. The phone would start ringing again.
Do I have time to talk?
Yeah, Ken.
All the adoptions that took place out of this Tennessee children, were they finalized in Tennessee?
No.
They weren't.
Many of them were.
Some were born here in California.
Yes, all along, many of them were done in other states, but particularly when this investigation broke in 1950, there were, I think it's 300 to 400 children who had been placed in their homes here in California, New York, other states, but the adoption had not been finalized. All of those were reinvestigated and eventually finalized in the state where the parents lived at that time. But from the very beginning, back in the early 30s, in some instances, the adoptions would take place in a state wherever the adopted parents lived. Okay, we have one more question.
How old was Ms. Tan when she died, and what did she die of?
She was 59 years old when she died of cancer. And she came to California, in that year she attended a picnic in Los Angeles before the Adopted Children's Association. Has a picture of her with Dick Powell and June Allison, and you can see and Smiley Burnett, who was a cowboy star, I believe. But so she was in bed for a month, and that was because this lady was a very determined, almost ruthless individual. So.
Is that time or is that a question?
That's a question.
That's a question.
Obviously, you can get the non-ID out. You can open up court records. Is there anything being done in Tennessee to say if you are a product of Georgia Tan, that things should be opened up for you? Someone trying to, say that in these particular cases, let's just open these things up. And
we have attempted to do that within our organization, and we have written and drafted legislation, and we have tried to get it through the legislature, and they will not make a separate issue out of the Tennessee Children's Home, they will not make a separate issue. So the only thing we can go for is for opening for everybody.
The machine of Memphis, the MM.
Well, I don't think there's a very definitive one out there. There has been some writing, but there's still family. Yeah, there's still family members alive, and they are not allowed the release of the information pertaining to their father, to their father. There's some, so no, there's really been no definitive history written of that yet.
That's right. Mr. Waldauer was the attorney, and there was no way that he didn't know what was going on. He was a very intelligent man.
Charles Crump is not E.H. Crump's son.
Really?
Really.
He's his cousin.
E.H. Crump's third cousin, I believe.
Really?
Really.
I was always told.
I've lived there all my life, and I know it all.
Are there any more current lawsuits on behalf of birth parents or people who, felt like they were ripped off by this situation and it might be possibly setting precedent, legal precedent?
I didn't hear the first part of your question.
I'm wondering whether there's any possibility or anything happening with either class action or personal lawsuits on the basis of people who could say, my child was stolen, that may set some precedent, or suits over possibly, legal misinformation.
I don't know of any, do you? There are not any going on now. Those parents who did attempt to do something after the investigation was conducted, the decisions that were made in the best interest of the child. The child had already been in the adoptive home, say 3 or 4 years, something or other like that. The legal decisions that were reached at that time were just to leave the children in the adoptive homes. I'm not aware of anything going on now at all about that.
I do think most of these birth parents are dead now, and I don't know what money you'd hope to get, because, we have, there's nobody from Judge Kelly except her daughter-in-law that are still living, and Georgetown has some grandchildren out here in California somewhere, and we didn't make the point, 2/3 of Georgetown's estate went back to the Tennessee Children's Home. There were 3 heirs of Georgetown. They got $1,600 apiece. That was all they had left. It went on for 9 years. It finally ended in ~59. The estate was closed. Her gross estate was found to just be $80,000, which is a lot more than, I don't know what it is in current money today, but she got money. I just don't believe she made herself wealthy. Anybody that looked like her every day didn't really care about, she was just very plain and has been described as looking like a prison matron. But Judge Kelly was just the exact opposite of her. And, but I just don't, I believe most people are probably dead. Maybe the adoptees, I don't know, maybe they could bring a suit. I don't know whether the state of Tennessee would be liable or not. This was like a private chartered corporation that received state funds. So it was sort of we'd be not totally certain what kind of entity it was, with all with the charters that were legal and the charters that were illegal. And I don't know that the state would argue immunity, and I don't know what kind of money you can get out of it now. I just don't believe there would probably be a whole lot of money, and there wouldn't be any other reason to sue, I guess.
Linda, excuse me, we do have to stop. We'd like to keep on telling you all about it, but we really have to let you go now. Thank you so much. We appreciate your being here.
This concludes this session.